In the course of your spiritual path, not everyone supports you and not everyone approves. This full moon is in Purva Phalguni Nakshatra, and a really well-known native is Madonna. So consider, last time Dinesh Nakshatra for the new moon, that was Marilyn Monroe. So consider the difference between Marilyn Monroe and Madonna, both iconic women. Here's the difference to point out. They were both sex symbols, but they were different. So Marilyn Monroe was very feminine and acquiesced. She had a certain usefulness because she made people feel a certain way. Madonna also has a usefulness, but in a different way. Madonna was not this blank canvas waiting for somebody to show her what to be. She was a woman with a vision, and what her vision was, what her creativity was, evolved over time, but she was the one with the vision. She was the one with the creativity. She was the one with the hard work. She was also the one who never stopped to ask people what they thought. She wasn't concerned if people liked her or agreed with what she was doing or how was she doing in the polls. She wasn't really concerned with public opinion. She had a vision and she realized that creative vision. So she is this epitome of creative force energy. Now, Phalguni means the pink fleshy parts of a woman. So this nakshatra is very much about sex, and sex is creativity. Sexual energy is creative energy. The two are not separate. The nakshatra is in Leo. All of these elements are encompassed in the 5th house. So anytime you are creating something, it's with this sexual energy. Now let's think about it for a minute in your own life. Esoterically, sex is not something that is stigmatized as it is in many cultures. So let's apply that principle in our own lives. While the words are very easy to say, be yourself, express yourself, be who you want to be, there are consequences to being who you want to be, especially if you are on a spiritual path, especially if you have some sense of purpose in the world, especially if you walk with direction and know that the endeavors you undertake have some more significant purpose. So what you are creating, not everybody sees it. Actually, nobody sees it. Only you see it. Other people can get pieces of it and maybe get an idea of what you're doing if they are so inclined to think that way. But you can't ever count on anybody to know what you're doing. So what happens is somebody will step in without knowing what the big picture looks like, without really knowing what you're creating, and they just pick apart the little things that you do. They pick apart the little pieces of how you do things. They see sections of your work and critique those sections, but they don't see the whole of your work. Only you see the whole of your work. So again, while it seems very easy to say, oh, just be yourself, walk with your purpose, there are consequences. If you have people around you who, for example, have different religious views or different spiritual views, sometimes there are consequences to that. Sometimes you're ostracized, sometimes you're considered evil, sometimes you're considered bad. There are consequences. If you have questions about what's going on, and for example, you go to see a mental health professional, and they don't know what you're talking about because they don't see the esoteric world, they don't have the abilities you have, they don't have the sight that you have, they'll look at you like you're crazy, and then that doesn't help at all. Or if you talk to just a regular person who doesn't have what you have, they don't see what you see, and they don't have the capacity to understand what you're talking about. What happens is that each time we encounter those situations, even though you know better, but still it chips away at you little by little by little. So it's not the grand sense of purpose, it's these little things, it's these small pebbles in your shoe that make the walk harder, that make the journey harder. But all of these parts that other people think are weird, that other people don't understand, but these parts that are actually the most interesting part of you, if you could talk about anything, this is what you would talk about. Keep developing those parts. Keep developing those parts. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says. Keep developing those parts because they are your most interesting parts. What you're curious about, this is what cures you. What you have the eye to see, the truth as you understand it, your perspective, that is what makes you your unique self. And nobody can see that but you. That means nobody else has that to offer to the world except you. So when these times come, when these small incisions of doubt come at you, you remember only you see what you see. And the fact that you see it, it's very important to bring it into the world. And that's what this nakshatra is about. The moon is in Purva Phalguni nakshatra. Preceding that was Maga, the ancestors, and Purva Phalguni is becoming immersed in another body. So you're out of the world and now you're in the world and creating. It's the power of positive procreation and actually the ability to create something. The symbols of it are a bed or a cot, a hammock, a platform. So what's associated with it is, think a platform, a guru, somebody teaching on a platform. So knowledge, and then the bed, a resting place. So a place temporarily where knowledge comes into the world and has a place to be expressed, but for now is resting. This energy also has to do with purging and releasing, because when something new comes in, we have to have let something else go. So these past few months, where we've been working on these changing situations and deciding what stays, what serves our highest purpose, what serves our path versus what impedes our path, we're making these changes and we're looking at our relationships and we're looking at our livelihoods and we're looking at our pastimes and we're looking at our friends and deciding what's there versus what should go. Everything that you've released, everything that you've calmly closed the door on has made room for now this creative energy from above. This nakshatra is also about divine partnership. So it's something from above that the individual is trying to merge with. It's the soul being let loose in the material world to gather knowledge, and then looking at who we partner with, how we partner with ourselves, and are we working with ourselves or against ourselves? So the lunar period of these next 2 weeks is this place of rest and acknowledging what's now come into your life, what resources you have available to you, and looking at what your soul is here to do. Uranus is in the 4th house in this chart, and the 4th house is our place of origin, our sense of home. It can either be the literal home or where we feel at home. And the fact that Uranus is present in the 4th house in this chart is indicating that how we feel about home is going to change. Creative energy is sexual energy. So for a minute, let's consider the tie between nudity and knowledge. Think of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, that story. Adam and Eve were naked. That wasn't the problem. The problem is when they became aware of the fact that they were naked. So it wasn't the nudity itself, it was awareness of it. We are made to feel so ashamed of our sex, of our body, of our physical desires, our imaginative desires. There's barely a place you can look where someone's not trying to make you feel self-conscious because they're trying to also sell you a solution. It can take a lifetime just to get over not feeling self-conscious about your appearance or your body or what your utility is to the opposite sex, because we even conceptualize our own usefulness to how, especially as women, whether or not men find us attractive. Thus, like, if men find us sexually useful to them. So it's interesting, right? Like, that dynamic's not the problem, but calling attention to that dynamic, awareness, and then bringing to conscious awareness that we are aware that that's happening. That's the problem. That's when you become a feminist. That's when you become a loudmouth person. That's when you become problematic, when you start to make other people feel uncomfortable. And that has to do with people who are trying to use your energy and redirect your creative energy, your sexual energy, in a way that's useful to them. Whereas this nakshatra is having you bring it back to yourself and the knowledge of how powerful that is and what you can do if that energy is harnessed and directed in a productive way. The setup alone of this chart is very telling. The first thing is what's called a bucket. So you have the moon, the handle, and then all of the other planets below. So you have the moon, your internal, your mentality, how you feel about things, your emotional state, casting light on all of the other elements. So how you're feeling about something, how you've been thinking about something, how you've been internally processing something. Now you're looking at that new mentality and you're looking at all of the areas of your life that you've been processing this information. The other thing, right? So the moon is in the 8th house and the sun is in the 2nd. So the 2-8 axis is the same axis that the eclipses were on back in December. The 2nd house has to deal with esteem. It also has to deal with our stuff, the money you make from the work that you do, but your esteem, reinforced by the stuff you have to speak for you. That's opposed to where the moon is now in the 8th house, and the 8th house is about alchemy and transformation and going deep. Your most vulnerable self is the 8th house. So when you're done with your transit in the 8th house, it's a different type of self-esteem. It's a self-esteem that's invisible. So whereas the second house is your stuff, but you have something to show for it, and that's how you derive your esteem, eighth house is something different. So it's the esteem you get from the spiritual work that you've done, but on the exterior, you don't have anything tangible to show for it. So consider how that shows up in the world. How we consider somebody who has done well. You have cool stuff. You have a nice house. You have a good income. You've got a cool car. You've got nice clothes. You can go places. You have stuff. So your stuff somehow speaks for you. And the way we get wrapped up in that is very subtle. How you get to see what you're really about is after that eighth house action. After you've gone through these invisible depths of things that you didn't want to visit, and you go through all the dirty, dark places of your existence, your background, your shame about money, your shit, like all of the secrets, all of the things that you never once said, when you come out the other side of your eighth house, the strength that you have is internal. It's a spiritual strength that you've had. Accumulation is the wrong word. So second and eighth house are different. So that's what this new moon is. Moon is in the eighth house, so you're going through something internal. Any growth you have that happens internally, nobody gives you a paycheck for that. So if it feels like thankless work, that's because socially it's not something that's particularly valued. The aspects for this chart are very interesting too. You have Saturn square Uranus as a feature. So Saturn, structure, coming up against Uranus, disruptions. So disruptions in your structure. Pluto is trining Mars. Pluto, looking underneath things, and then Mars, what are you going to do about it? So now that you have this truth, what are you going to do about it? Moon, trining Uranus. Trine means that this is just a very natural energy flow. So you are now in the mood to do something unexpected. And then Sun, sextiling Uranus, there's an opportunity there. Aquarius, sun, moon, and rising. This full moon is occurring in your seventh house. And your seventh house is your spouse, your committed partnerships, contracts, close one-on-one relationships. So if you live with somebody, and the full moon is asking you to look at how you express yourself in your partnerships. And do you have the freedom to express yourself in the way that you want? And so it's shedding light on your first house, and your first house is you. So what you're looking at is how you are in your relationships, but you're looking at you, right? So you're staring across the way. Do you recognize yourself in this relationship? Is this what you had in mind when it started? Whatever evolved, wherever it got to, is this how you want to see it going? So remember, first house, you, self, and seventh house, you in relationship, you're looking at each other. Who you are in relationship with certainly has an effect on how you feel about yourself and how you express yourself. So are you limited in your expression, or are you encouraged to be everything you can be in your expression? And in a spiritual sense, is your partner on the same path as you? So does your partner even know what you're talking about when you speak about these things? Does your partner appreciate these things? Talking like somebody you live with, your spouse, your significant other, or your business partner, whoever you are walking through life with, whoever you are advancing and you have close to you, do they understand you? And is the relationship between you as such that you can feel comfortable that you are engaging in the same conduct, you're playing by the same set of rules, so therefore you have a level of comfort that you don't have to worry about that, you feel safe in that situation, and you can creatively express yourself in the way that you want. Now, Pluto, the planet of transformation, has been transiting your 12th house, and your 12th house is stuff behind the scenes. This is your spiritual life. This is, if you are into psychic development, it's that stuff, but it's retreat, and retreat can include where you go for quiet, meditation, versus like, do you drink, do you zone out, do you use drugs? This is all 12th house stuff. So it's where you go to rest and rejuvenate. It's also your house of spirituality, and it's also your house of behind the scenes, deep subconscious healing. Having a look at those deep things. Pluto remembers transformation. So Pluto, this intense planet, going through the 12th house, this really deep house, you're looking at you behind the scenes. And since you've been doing that, now you're ready to initiate some action. So with what you've found about yourself and about your spiritual development and about what's really, really, really going on with you deeply, now you're ready to initiate some action. And that action is going to take place it's like the cusp of the third, fourth house. So it's stuff that's close to you. Third house has to do with your thinking, your communication, commerce. but more so has to do with community, has to do with siblings, has to do with like your immediate environment. So you may be initiating some action if you're a community organizer, or with your siblings, or something in your like something in your neighborhood, or it may have to do with your business, have to do with your commerce, the way that you advertise yourself. That's third house. The action may also take place though in your fourth house, which is the house of home and family. So Pluto going through your 12th house, what you've learned about yourself and what you see you really need, and maybe what was really missing, what should be there, what shouldn't be there. Now you're making changes in your immediate environment. So these could be changes like physical changes to your house. These could be physical changes to your office. This could be a different way that you're interacting with what's close to you and who is close to you. But the energy is in a trine, so it's going to flow very naturally. It's not some hard choice. The hard parts already happened for the last couple months. Pluto we've dealt with. So now you're going to initiate action to implement what you've learned. Now Saturn, the planet of limitations, restriction, time, Saturn is in your first house, your house of self. So how you think about yourself, how you conceptualize you. It's squaring Uranus in the third. So you, as opposed to your environment. We just went over third house stuff. So the way that you work with a square is that you become aware that something's going to happen with you and something's going to happen with third house. Remember, your thinking, your communication, your commerce, or community, neighborhood, siblings, like stuff close to you, short distance travel. But there's going to be some tension between you and that stuff. So the Saturn is here. The Saturn is in your first house, how you think, maybe how you think things should go, how you think you interact with things. And then the Uranus is something unexpected in your third house. So the way that you work with the square, be aware that it's happening. And then when that tension occurs, watch for how you can integrate these things successfully, because energy occurrences, none of them are neither inherently good nor bad. It's just what you do with them. It's how you work with them. Think of it like a plot in a movie. The movie's not any good if everything's smooth. It's what you do with what happens to you. That's what makes it interesting. So that's how you work with a square. Because your sun in the first house is also trining Uranus. So with this square, there's also some opportunity. So look specifically for that. It's a good aspect. So, Uranus could be a good surprise or a bad surprise, But with the sun trine Uranus, this is going to be something that is an opportunity for you. And your moon coming from the seventh house, so your moon looking at relationships, the internal, is also trining with Uranus. So you're going to feel calm about things. You're going to feel comfortable about things because that energy is a trine. So you're going to feel comfortable with it, and then you're going to have an opportunity to act on it. So whatever happens, it's something that seems well within your control. Have you noticed that the places you once were are not the places you can be anymore? Where you've come from, that ground is burned behind you. Who you used to know, not only do they not do it for you anymore, but you physically have a hard time being around them. Energetically, it just doesn't fit anymore. It's just not a match anymore. But more than intellectually challenging, it's actually physically challenging. It's energetically challenging. Socially, that's very awkward because you don't fit in. You fit in fewer and fewer places. But in a spiritual sense, this is good news because it means you're growing. So it means the clearing out, and then the people you're going to meet, you're now making room for them, and they are an energetic match. Maybe they're not doing exactly what you are doing, but you guys are headed in the same direction, and you'll find more people who are headed in a similar direction. This is growth. So here's how to use the energy for the next couple weeks. Purva Phalguni is the coming together of things. So the feminine aspect from above and the masculine aspect, the material aspect from below. You're bringing them together. And this nakshatra is a place where the knowledge finds temporary rest and is regrouping and deciding what to do. So you have Kama, the purpose, the desire to create something. You have Venus, the ruler, who imparts wisdom and counsel and advice. And you have Vishnu, the deity, which is about the preservation of what is coming into being. So presently, we're at a place where your soul is finding rest before you begin the next stages of your journey. So what you can do in this time pull your resources together, right? If you haven't watched the last video of the new moon, watch it. Along your path, when things weren't going how you thought they should go, you learned a lot of other things. You encountered a lot of other people. You maybe worked at different jobs. You learned different trades. You maybe developed abilities. You met people who taught you things. You had time to read things. You had time to learn things. But what your knowledge looks like now, what your experience looks like now, is far more advanced than probably what you think it is. Because what you learn when things aren't going how you think, that's its own university. So you pull your resources together. Who do you know now? What do you know now? How can you apply it now? And you start to plan your next moves. And then the second element of this is that service is based on friendship and trust. So who's around you? Who can help you move in the direction you're moving? Who can you trust? It's odd too, as you start to enter into these things, people you've known forever or for a long time, they don't know what you're talking about. And then you can meet somebody who is a perfect stranger and you fall right into that conversation because you speak the same language. So we're looking at who's not an energetic or spiritual fit for you and who is an energetic or spiritual fit for you to enhance your ability to bring your creative expression into the world. So for right now, pull your resources together, integrate all of the experiences you've come through, and appreciate how difficult your journey's been and how far you've come and all of the things you know now. It's not a small thing. So take inventory, integrate, consider your partnerships, and rest.